Welcome back to Screenfish Radio. I'm
Did
so
we ever
glad,
leave, Steve? Really?
We
you
live
know,
here.
there was actually a huge gap of me recording, but because of other things, it doesn't feel like it. I didn't leave the internet, but the actual Screenfish Radio, which I love so much, there was a huge gap. So I'm glad to be here with you both as the early beginnings of season 10 of
Oh,
yes, season
wow.
10 of Screenfish Radio. Um, it, I am always thrilled to have these gentlemen back. We always have great conversations, and I absolutely appreciate having Robert Bellissimo and Dave Voigt of In the Seats. Welcome back, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thanks for
Well, thanks
having
for
me.
having us.
Guys, I'm really excited to have this conversation because this week we are talking about Killers of the Flower Moon. Set at the turn of the 20th century, Killers of the Flower Moon tells the story of Ernest Burkhart, a war veteran who arrives at his uncle's farm looking for a job. When he arrives, his uncle William Hale speaks about his advocacy and partnership with the Osage Nation, who becomes some of the richest people in the world overnight after the discovery of oil on their land. Hired as a taxi driver, Ernest meets Mollie, a beautiful Osage woman who is heir to a vast fortune. However, as the two strike up a relationship, the nation becomes plagued with mysterious deaths of the Osage people that threatens to undercut their families and the vast wealth that they have acquired. The film stars Robert De Niro
That's
and
better.
Leonardo DiCaprio. And as always, this podcast is rated S for spoilers. So, gentlemen, I want to know, what did you think of Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon?
Dave, go ahead.
Well, all right. It's it's interesting because I mean, in many ways, this follows so many of the familiar beats when it comes to Scorsese and some of the stuff, the beloved things like Irishman, Goodfellas, whatnot. There are some very similar beats going on. But I think what really struck me the most about this film, which again is absolutely fantastic, it's 3.5 hour runtime, does not feel as such, is just, I would say, the commentary, not just from on a sort of look at what happened, but almost more of a look at how horrible we are kind of gaze. This is not, at least from my perspective, a film that is forcing us to experience the horrors of someone else's culture. It's one that is forcing us to go, oh my God, we're the worst, and look at what we are capable of and the horrible things that we've done upon each other and one another. And that's where the film's power really does lie.
Yeah. Yeah, I certainly uh agree with that. And it's interesting when before I get into my feelings, I'm always a little like I think when Scorsese releases a new movie, the expectations are so high. And
Yes.
then on the flip side, however, he is the most, and in America or perhaps other parts of the world, he is the most revered filmmaker today. So sometimes I am a little wary of the love he gets because I can't help but think, is this just because it's him and whatever he does, people are going to praise it? Uh, because if you look at the last just over 20 years of his career, before that, he was never fully embraced in the Hollywood mainstream world. He was like, he was and he wasn't. He was always an outsider to an extent. And then once he started working with Leo, everything he started to do, I'm not saying those films aren't very good, from Gangs in New York on, everything with the exception of, I think Shutter Island really got so much love, so much praise, big box office, tons of Academy Award nominations. We saw even with this film at Cannes, standing applause right away. And again, it just makes me a little wary because I'm thinking, okay, well, let's really look at it. So with that being said, I agree with Dave. I thought it was fantastic. I mean, I thought it was a great film. Um, and really, what was interesting was, yes, he has those similar themes that we see time and time again, betrayal, greed, crime, those kind of things that he's, morals, a question of one's morals that come up again and again in his films. But it's very neo-noir at the same time, which I was like, you know what, I'm on my Patreon, one of the videos I have is neo-noir or not, like looking at, films, whether they are, what makes a noir now. And we have some of those staples with greed, motivated. I mean, the DiCaprio character is from the war, and like a lot of the classic film noir characters, and he's motivated not only by greed but also by sex, by both. So he's like the homme fatale, because he's, usually the women in film noir were motivated by money, but in this case he's motivated by both sex and money. And of course, just people who will do whatever they can to get ahead, which is you saw that a lot in film noir. So I thought it was great. I do think, it was interesting because I couldn't help but think, okay, so much praise. What is not sitting right with me? There were a few things that didn't quite sit right with me. I did, as much as I liked DiCaprio and as captivating, I think he's a very captivating actor. To me, there's always this element of he's just doing a little too much. There's always just this force with his performance, where if you look at DeNiro, it's just effortless. Not that DeNiro doesn't have his share of bad performances, but DiCaprio, he's just always doing a little too much. And I did think that character perhaps should have been a young man, because he's impressionable. He is someone who's under his uncle's thumb. Again, he's hungry from to get ahead. It's a very young person mentality. And I thought, yes, I know DiCaprio looks young, but he doesn't look like he's in his 20s anymore. Like he's almost 50. And so I understand that when Scorsese has a project, Leo is going to be on the top of the list for casting, but I don't always know if that's always the best choice. So again, I admired his performance in some ways, but I just thought, it takes me out of it a little bit. And there were some issues with the Lilly Gladstone, I believe, who was his wife in this.
Yes. Yes, it's Lilly
because
Gladstone.
Yeah, I mean, again, she could see that he wanted her because she was rich, but then she fell for him, and I did believe he loved her. And she was intelligent enough very early on to see his motives. But I did think it was a good choice to see, with all these murders going on, very people close to her, that the grief and her illness would have blinded her to what DiCaprio was up to until later, you see. But I just thought once she does really grasp what he was up to, she leaves him, but it felt very casual. I just thought there should have been something more with that relationship that was just missing. I couldn't understand why they hugged after he was arrested. He gets out of the car and they hug, and he's like, "I'm sorry." Maybe she was just still trying to put everything together in her mind. I just thought we needed something more from her perspective. So I don't put it up there as a masterpiece. My mind may change seeing it again. I did think it was great, but I do think it had some flaws. I don't know how you both felt about.
I've got a dovetail just before you go, Steve. Something on you said, not only about Leo, but because to me, sort of that quote unquote trying was him wrestling with sort of the moral ambiguity and acknowledging kind of what was going on. But ultimately, yeah, you're right. He is too old to be playing 22 anymore. That's just a reality.
Yeah.
But also in terms of her reaction to him, I think the point was, at least from my perspective, to give us a sense of, I guess, how these people had no concept of the evil that they were encountering. Like when and this happens to anybody in any kind of day-to-day life. If you encounter somebody or someone who will do these heinous things to other people or whatnot without thought of repercussion or what it's going to do to these people or it's hard to grasp that these people even exist. Like, if you encounter a sociopath or, someone who is completely self-absorbed in their own, methods, and then they hurt you, but then they don't acknowledge that they hurt you or don't know how to acknowledge that they hurt you. It's a fascinating, to me, portrait of just, on one end, sort of an introduction to evil in many ways, but also just a stark reminder, as it again shines a light back on us, that why are we fascinated with these stories? Like, why are we fascinated with true crime? Why are we fascinated with the pain and suffering of others? Like, why is this something that in many ways, shapes, and forms is a form of entertainment at this stage?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great question because there is something so compelling about that aspect of this film. The beats may be similar to other films, whether of course Scorsese had made them or not, but we keep going back there.
I mean,
We
I think that's why he ended it as the sort of the radio play,
Yeah,
to sort of give us that sort of mirror back on ourselves.
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Um,
I mean, there's so many layers to it too, because I mean, even from a historical standpoint, like, there was no FBI before these things started to
Right.
happen. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like,
Yes.
this was the birth of so many different things. Like, there's a reason they called it the Wild West. It quite literally was.
Yeah.
See, and what I think I found most compelling about Leo's character, Ernest, is he felt like he felt like he was the majority. And I'll explain. First of all, I'd like to say, just as a side note, as I'm offended that you would think that somebody in their mid to late 40s doesn't look like they do in their 20s. Not that I have any skin in the game on this one, but I'm just I agree totally. He did seem little old for this character,
Yeah.
but it was kind of fun to see him play such a rube. Like he was just I can't think of the last time I've seen Leo play a guy that was so easily manipulated. He's usually a person of power or building power. And it was interesting listening to you talk about him, Robert, because I didn't feel like his motivation. I mean, maybe his motivation was money, maybe it was sex. I just thought maybe sex to me makes more sense given what we saw, but money, he was dangled money, like it was dangled in front of him like a carrot.
Right.
Okay, I'd like some money, but you have such a spectrum here. You've got DeNiro, you've got King, who is just like, yeah, I mean, the reason he's so good at this character is he's played a character like this so many times with a
Yes.
snarl.
Yes.
Um,
But this is such a different way of doing it, which I thought was also compelling. Because he's like this charmer.
yeah,
Like he does everything, and like like let's compare it to like Goodfellas, like where he's ruthless and threatening. Here he is that as well, but he doesn't. I mean, how often did he yell or shout? I mean, couple of scenes, but not much. He's usually does everything in this very calculating, smooth, charming way, which again was it's like Boone Wells said. Boone Wells said he was only interested in certain things, and all his movies are about that, but he did it in different ways. And I think not that Scorsese, all of his movies are the same, but this kind of a story he's done many times. And again, this was a different way of doing it, very different way of doing it.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the duality that De Niro has in this film, where he can speak out of both sides of his mouth, is actually fascinating to watch. I will say, I don't ever want to hear him do a Southern accent ever again. But
Oh,
uh,
did you not like
I,
his
I was not a fan.
That's
To me,
interesting.
he
Yeah.
kept sliding in and out of it. To me, he kept sliding in and out of it. Like I thought he was struggling, but his performance was phenomenal. But that was one of the things I took away. But The other side, of course, you've got Mollie, you've got Lilly Gladstone. I thought she was a great character.
Yeah.
Mm,
I thought she was phenomenal, and
yeah.
I wasn't bothered by the fact that you say her, she starts off sort of knowing and then sort of falls in love. I don't think she ever really stops knowing. I think the relationship sort of changes, and the more murders, the more death piles up around her. I just felt like she was getting drained of life. I mean, also she's being poisoned. There's all this other stuff. She has the
Yeah.
diabetes. She has all these things, but
Yeah. Oh, I
it,
liked all that. Yeah. Yeah. It was more like once it really sinks in. I just thought I just felt something was lacking there.
oh sure,
Yeah, it was sort of, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when they hugged after he gets arrested, he goes and meets her. See, again, I wish I could go watch it again, but it's not on a streamer yet. Um, that was like, I mean, I couldn't figure out why is she being kind. I mean, maybe she was still just trying to wrap her head around this. What else, she just, yeah, that was something I thought. And then finally she walks away, but something didn't sit right with me there.
see,
It also speaks to the duality of Leo's character. This young man eager for love, eager for respect, eager for sort of placement. Because I mean, especially to me, especially as we meet him, it's not, to me, it wasn't sex or money. It was status. It was wanting to sort of elevate himself out of the working class and be a quote unquote somebody.
Right.
I mean, I think there was definitely something there that she fell in love with. And I mean, I think that was the thread that kept them connected for so long, because at least in my mind, and seeing her performance, you could see he loved her.
yeah,
Oh yeah, no, I
Okay.
thought that were yeah. Yeah, it was interesting because the guy who runs oh God, I have to look up. It's a very good podcast. He was saying he didn't quite buy that they were in love. He just felt that was rushed. But I thought that worked well. And again, going back to film noir, again, the men fall so hard for the women from again, in terms of like lust and attraction, that often they wind up doing things that they know are wrong, but they do it because they're just falling so hard for the women. And in this case, you could say that she is like the male protagonist often in film noir, because she says those blue eyes, and he is a very handsome guy. So in a way, it's that lust. Not that it was just that, because obviously they have kids, they get married, and time goes on. But I thought that was interesting because she was so attracted to him. And I think it was the guy, I forget the writer who wrote LA Confidential, the book. Is it James?
James Elroy.
Yeah, Elroy. He was like, you know what film noir is? He's like, when they hook you up to the electric chair and you're so grateful that you just had 2 weeks with the best sex in your life that you're willing to die. That's film noir. And I was like, yeah, that is film noir. And in a way, you could say that with her. I mean, it's more complicated than that. But again, it was interesting. I mean, he was more like the home fatale, right? And she was more of the doomed protagonist, you could
Well,
say.
and it spoke to his denial of what his uncle really was. I mean, especially
Yeah.
in those moments of, well, oh, you're getting the insulin, aren't you special? There's only 7 people in the world getting this insulin. And then there was the special insulin,
Right. Yeah. The corrupt doctors. Yeah. I mean, he was like the devil on his shoulders. I particularly like the scene where I forget exactly what DeNiro's character burns down at a certain point. That's like this big house that's on fire. And it's just
his
him.
farm, yeah.
That's right. His farm. And he's just watching it burn with this neutral expression. And they're cutting back to DiCaprio in his bedroom with his wife. And his like fire is outside of his window and he's just lying down. And I thought, wow, what a powerful image. What a way to use the medium and to say so much. And those moments, those images were so emotional. And, in this case, he does begin to see like, what the hell am I doing? Why he's just, he has more of human qualities than DeNiro's character. DeNiro, who's just, he's just a straight up devil, with the puppet strings manipulating everything. So
And it
yeah,
wasn't
it's very
done.
interesting.
Yeah, and it wasn't done in a bum 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 kind of manner where he's sitting on his porch sneering. The devil comes in many forms. The man
Exactly.
with an
Yeah.
olive branch.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So some other negative comments I heard was people were like, didn't feel it had any suspense, but I thought it totally had suspense because, again, suspense is, like Hitchcock says, the audience know more than the characters, and we know more than everybody except De Niro. We know as much as he does, and we're thinking, oh God, don't trust this guy, and it has that visceral response. We know what he's doing the entire film. Whereas if they had stuck to I know originally it was going to be from the point of view of the detectives, and I think if they had stuck with that, it would have been more whodunit, an investigation. It would have been less emotional. So I am glad that Scorsese and Roth, the writer, made that change. I don't know how you guys. I'm sure you both know that backstory of that.
Yeah, that was the original intent, was it not? They were going to follow the FBI.
Yes, yes.
And then I think it was DiCaprio came back and said, we can't do it this way. We need to take our time with it, and we need to change the focus. But I might be wrong.
Yeah.
I think
Well,
that's
no, they went, Scorsese, the Osage community were concerned, and I can understand why they were concerned, because it's like, another white director telling a story about indigenous people or any other minority. And I can totally understand why they were concerned about that. And they said, we deserve to have perspectives in this story. Don't just show them as victims. Don't just show us as victims. And then Scorsese thought, okay, let's get more of their perspectives, which they did. You see those scenes of like, there was one where the really good scene, or like this tribe were all discussing what they were experiencing, and they knew what was going on based on their history, of course. I do think at the same time, I don't know how you do this story without showing the horrors of what they encountered.
Yeah.
Because I know one of the, I forget, is it Reservation? There's a star of some TV show now, I forget the show, who's indigenous, and she thought,
Deborah Jacobs. Yeah.
Yeah, and she was saying,
Reservation Dogs.
She hated it because it just shows them as victims. But I was sort of like, well, I don't know how else you tell this story, not because it is about the brutality of what they experience and where these
and not
motives.
Comprehending the brutality, like really being only just on the cusp of going like, oh shit, this is happening, like not seeing it until it's too late, kind of thing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I did think they did a pretty, as much as they could. And I know a lot of people from the indigenous community liked it, because I saw some interviews, but you can't please everybody. And again, I do think the film has some flaws, but again, I don't know how you do this without, without showing what they went through. I'm not really sure what her problems were, but again, I'm talking from a white perspective, so I can't, maybe I'm seeing something, maybe I can't see something that she's seeing. I don't know.
It's interesting, because in watching this, I was thinking about something else that Eric Roth co-wrote, which would have been Munich a few years ago.
The Spielberg, is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, it's a hard story about horrible things that happen, but and I mean, I don't want to bring up I'm not going to bring up the Jewish or the relatability or the representation issue. It's one of those things where, in watching this film, I felt the power of it without being hit over the head with it.
Yes, me too. Yeah, because it's very slow. I know he said, he wanted that pace to feel very, in a good way. I mean, everything was just, it just was very gradual, and the motives were done carefully. And again, that score, I thought that was one of the best scorers in a Scorsese movie.
I hope they give, I mean, posthumously, but I mean, I hope Robbie gets the Oscar, seriously.
Such a good score. Yeah, it was so, and Scorsese is not really known for scores because he usually uses rock music.
Hmm.
as we all know. But this, I was like, wow, this was just so subtle. And what didn't hit you over the head, like you said, Dave, was just complemented everything beautifully, I felt.
Well, and it's interesting because I mean, especially given the love that this has gotten, and I mean the attention, and I mean obviously when it comes on Apple, I mean you were saying coming to a streamer, it's coming to a streamer, it'll be going to Apple TV Plus,
Right,
but
right. Yes.
it's one of those things where, to me, especially when you look at the Scorsese canon, this falls more in the territory of Last Temptation of Christ, Silence,
Yeah.
the more thoughtful, the more contemplative stuff than rather the Goodfellas, the Irishman, the or even the studio stuff, the Aviator, the Departed. I mean, the fact that he's only ever won for the Departed is funny,
Right.
for a lack of a better word. I mean, the Departed's not a bad movie, but it's a remake of a Chinese film.
Yeah. Yeah, that's when Hollywood was like, "Wait a minute, you're working with Leo? Okay, get the Oscar for Scorsese. we'll
Can we have a
embrace.
trilogy? No.
If you're working with our boy, you get the Oscar. That's what happens." Not that Leo was a pure Hollywood guy. I mean, he did some very interesting things in the '90s, but because of Titanic things, I mean, he was,
It was the combination, though. I mean, it was Leo, Matt, it was Jack, it was Mark, it was all
so many people. Yeah. But again, it's interesting. It'd be interesting down the road for people to look back at Scorsese's 21st century period, because like he's just been embraced in a way that he never really was before. Like he was and he wasn't before that. He was always an outsider. Now, not so much. Not so much.
This reminded me a lot of Silence. It did. If you look back at the last decade, a lot of his, again, you talk about the length. His lengths have gotten longer, and I feel like even the Irishman feels more like his older films in some ways, but it's also much more contemplative. I think the last decade of his films have really tried to sit.
Yeah.
More so.
Yeah.
I actually, going back to what you were saying, Rob, I actually am thrilled that he took the tone that he did.
Me too.
Because he's a white director, quite frankly. My fear, and I said this to Dave when we went and saw it, I said, my fear going in was that it was going to be another Dances with Wolves type film. I hadn't really seen the trailers. I was like, oh, no, please don't.
Yeah,
don't
I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that film.
It was of its day. Let's put it that way. We are beyond and white savior complex is a term that's thrown around a lot.
Yes.
It would fall heavily into that sort of conversation.
Right. Where we don't have that, thank God.
Yeah. And with this one in Killers of the Flower Moon, one of the things I liked about it was its reflection on just sort of the darkness of, like, I don't think they portrayed, I'm not of the Osage Nation. I can't speak for them in that. I didn't feel they were portrayed in a weak manner.
Neither did I.
Jacobs believes differently.
It would have been nice to see a little bit more of the characters fleshed out.
Yes.
But I mean, that's probably my only nitpick.
I agree with that. I felt like there were really the only member of the Osage Nation that we spend time with is Mollie.
Yeah.
Extended. We see these moments, but she's the one we spend time with.
And I guess second to that would be her sister that was murdered, but even that was fairly small.
See, I mean, I want a little more with Tantu as the mother, as the grandmother,
Yeah. Well, there's more characters than it felt like after. Actually.
Yeah. They were just they were throughout, and it was small. But again, it's that like the story. It's a story that is so much about what these people went through that I don't know, how else, it'd be different if it was like a war, or if they fought back against DeNiro or something. But again, that would be a whole other story. That would be more like a Western, really.
Right. Well, and this one, this is what I felt like. This film's an American tragedy, right? Like, this is us staring into our own souls and being, oh my gosh, what, that's what I thought. That's what I thought about DiCaprio. That's why I say he was sort of like maybe the majority, because he was swaying back and forth when you look at the cultural scale. And it was and I almost felt that Mollie, in under these particular circumstances, I felt that Mollie did love him, but it was almost a motherly at times. Like, not I know that can be a little bit weird when you think about their marriage and whatnot, but that's not what I'm trying to suggest. But like you asked about the hug.
Yeah.
I don't think that it was that she went, oh, everything's fine. It's not that. I felt that it was sort of like, okay, now what am I going to do with you? Sort
Mm,
of thing.
mm,
And
yeah.
no, not all the truth was revealed at that point. She didn't have all the information.
I mean,
Um,
there wasn't a single moment in this entire film where Leo was not completely out of his depth. And I mean,
every
and that end moment is the acknowledgement of that, really, in so many ways.
yeah.
Yeah. I really like the scene where she didn't want to take her medication anymore. And he again was great because that was another showcasing his love for her. Like he was like, no, you have to take it, like you're gonna die if you don't take it. So I was glad that they went into that marriage more than I think it was originally planned, when it was going to be about the detectives. So yeah, there was some great, certainly some very, very captivating moments between them, I thought.
And it
Absolutely.
leaned into the stereotype of, what I mean, an earned one, which because of obviously the end results of, the white man's medicine is just poison. Anything the white man does is gonna kill you, so on and so forth. The duality of all that was played so gorgeously.
Mm, mm,
Absolutely. Well,
yeah.
with that being said, I mean, one of the things that I find interesting about this film, we've talked a lot about the evil in this. It's because it's pervasive, but it's on a number of fronts. And I was just wondering for you, is there some form, some aspect, some root that you think is deeper than the rest? I mean, we can look at the actions and we say the murders are evil. Well, yes, they are. But I was wondering if there's a deeper, something deeper going on that struck you about these characters in the story.
It,
Well,
it it's the quest for power,
Mm.
yeah.
because it's them sitting on land filled with oil. America is expanding.
Mm,
White men are coming out to seize control of that power, and it's the old adage of absolute power will corrupt absolutely. And I mean, it's it's the concept. It's such a concept that was so foreign and so strange. And I mean, I think that's the importance of the story in many ways, because I mean, Steve, you can speak to this as well, but I mean, you and I have seen plenty of films that deal with the indigenous experience, and made by indigenous filmmakers, and trying to sort of capture something that isn't, on one end torture porn, on the other end not sort of, good guy bad guy, but there is something. And I mean, I think this is so important to pull out of. It's important for us to sort of, I mean, and I say this to the three of us as white men, to sit and to listen.
Mm.
And so much of the acceptance of other people's experiences and other people's stories comes in the ability of just being able to sit down, shut up, and listen. And I mean, I think that's what Scorsese's telling us here.
mm. It's interesting because they even say when, the one Lilly Gladstone, she knows that DiCaprio's initially attracted to her because of her money, and and then a friend of hers says, well, his uncle's rich, so he can't just want you for money, which obviously she believed. And that's what's so interesting, is that DeNiro's character is already rich, and like Dave said, power corrupts and you just want more and more of it. And
People
obviously
just want to get richer.
exactly. And we've seen, corporate greed since the 80s get worse and worse and worse, and it doesn't stop. And I saw, because now we see with the SAG strike, like
Yeah.
Fran Drescher was interviewed by Bernie Sanders, and Sanders said something interesting, is he feels that greed is it's almost like a sickness. It's like it should maybe be treated the way we treat alcoholism or drug addiction. So it's sometimes you can't fathom why these people are doing these things, why they're so apathetic. And we don't know his backstory, DeNiro. And I think it's good that we don't know.
Yeah.
I if he was, they could have shown him as being only valued for what he achieves as a kid or something to give some kind of but I'm glad that they didn't do that, because that would be too easy. Because I think greed is so addictive for people in these powerful positions that it's impossible to boil down, and maybe treating it as something we have to look at these days. I really don't know.
The film also does make slight reference. I mean, because De Niro is a Mason, it references, has subtle reference to those sort of secret organizations. It does reference the KKK ever so slightly.
Oh,
it
right,
does
yes.
reference the Tulsa race riots ever so slightly.
Yeah.
There are it's such an interesting dynamic to see where America was at that point. Because we have this image of what was happening on the East Coast. In the middle and western parts, it was a lot wilder. That's why the FBI was formed. That's why these things were installed, because America was still growing as a place that needed to be able to have power to govern itself. Otherwise, what did happen would still be happening.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think for me the key word, I mean, power is a great word. I think for me the key word is entitlement. Because De Niro rolls in, builds relationships so he can snake everybody, and he refers. I can't remember if it's his character or not. I think it was his character refers to it as white money. Does anybody else remember that reference? I think it was him, but sort of like this.
I can't
sort of
recall
like
I don't remember the line, but I mean, I agree with you on sort of the nature of the character, because I mean, again, they're rolling in. Oh, this is ours anyway. No, this isn't your land. We're the white people. This is ours. This is our country. We're Americans. You're not American. You're Indians.
Yeah, I think that's the context. He's referring to the money that the Osage people have found.
Yeah.
And he refers to. I think the reference is the fact that because they have all this money, they have white money now. They're dressed up. They've got their cars. They're doing this. But there's this attitude of entitlement saying, yeah, but that should have been ours. And if I take it, it is. Like the most appalling and strangely laughable in the most horrifying way moment for me is when there's that one guy who gets married and adopts the kids.
Oh, yes.
And it's like done in such a way that it's almost like there's a dark humor to it, but it's like horrifying.
Because he's so, yeah, exactly. Because he's so casual about it.
Yeah.
And I think the lawyer's like, are you just going to kill these kids and then inherit all of that they're going to inherit? And he's,
well, none of them are going to get in trouble for it.
Yeah, that was it. That was, which again, yeah, is horrific yet darkly funny because of the way he's behaving.
It's the flat humor to it. Like it's just the flatness of his response.
Right. No feeling for anyone at all, which again is so, I mean, look around us. That's happening everywhere.
Every day, daily. It's the treatment of these people as being less than people.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's such a simple edict that, like you say, Rob, that we've forgotten in our day-to-day lives. It's like, if you treat people like people, so much good can happen.
Yeah.
But most of us don't.
Exactly. Yeah. I couldn't help but think of Goodfellas towards the end when he rats on De Niro. And it was literally, I thought, Scorsese, don't do the move-in shot of De Niro's face in the courtroom. and he didn't, because it was the exact same thing where he's like, can you point the man out in the courtroom? Just like Henry Hill points over to Jimmy Conway. And I was like, again, I mean, it's that thing of betrayal, but he's similar to Henry Hill, because even Henry Hill knew he was doing things that were so bad, but couldn't help himself, but he did have that feeling of, oh my God, what are we doing? Like, are we really just shooting this guy because he told Joe Pesci's character to go fuck himself? And it's just very similar in that sense. So again, it's always interesting to look at filmmakers and the stories they tell, because thematically he's very interested in that. And
well, I mean, it's the idea that people exist on different stratas of value than
yeah.
and I mean
Yes.
that is such an I mean that runs so through the Brendan Fraser lawyer character, especially when they have Leo over to the house and it's like, listen, boy, look what
Yeah.
you're doing to your uncle, and and it's
Yes.
like,
Yes.
good grief.
Yes. Yeah, that was really interesting. I also love when again it was like darkly humor, and it shows how fucked up this got, because DiCaprio's character's child dies and they tell him in prison, and you don't know that De Niro's in the next cell, and it's like, and he's just like oh man, I'm so sorry. And I couldn't help but laugh. I'm like, holy shit, you guys are like, look at you, like you're in prison next side by side. Was gonna rat on you, and now he's changing sides, and he changes back. And I'm like, do you not see? And it's again like De Niro he's acting like they're just at home, like it's like they can't even fathom how fucked up this is, because they're just delusional, they're insane, particularly De Niro's character.
Well, De Niro thought he was the smartest guy in the room, no
Right,
matter what room
exactly.
he walked into.
Yeah.
I was gonna say in every room. He thought he was
Yeah.
this guy in every room.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing it again, because it's one of those I remember, because I think since 2002 I've seen all of his movies in the theaters. And so the repeat, it's always those films that you see because they're so dense, you see more, particularly 3.5 hours. I mean, it's, you got to see it. You got to see it a couple of times at least. If, I know when I saw Irishman the second time, I saw so much more.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Because there's so many characters, so many locations, so many points of views. And it's interesting because I think, like you said earlier, Steve, this element of like, why are we so interested in true crime? I mean, it's like we deal with these topics in a way all the time. Your people going to work and getting, poor wages. And this is happening everywhere. Corporate greed is just happening everywhere. But there is something fascinating about people who work, either outside of the law or are willing to do this. And so there's something commercial about that. I think that's why Scorsese has succeeded in the mainstream, because people are very interested in why people do this. And I don't know if that is, I mean, it's a reality. I don't know if that's always necessarily a good thing to be not, I mean, not that it's a bad thing, but maybe there are more valuable things for us to look at. I don't know how you both feel about that. I just feel maybe that's why
not
he's
just that, but I think it goes back to just centering around the De Niro character, because on one end, you see him and you see what he's doing. And I mean, having some personal experience in this in my life, which I've shared with Steve privately, but when you meet this kind of person who does what they want, who acts independent of emotional consequences or physical or law-abiding consequences to anyone else in their orbit, it's hard to comprehend what they're doing until you look back and go, oh shit, that just happened.
right.
And I mean, in seeing that paired with Lilly's performance, it's one of those things where it was, you look at it and you go, well, yeah, he's not the nicest guy, but he, you just, keep him over there and everything will be fine. And then once everything goes to shit, you're like, oh my God, that happened.
Yeah.
And you never understand it until after the fact.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that's where I guess the crux of the Osage representation came from, because I mean, to me, it all prisms through her character. So, okay, well, they're here and we're all getting along and that's nice. And then all of a sudden, oh shit, look what just happened,
Right.
And especially in a time and in a place where it was very easy to circumvent the law.
Yeah.
Right.
And this is where I think, where I see, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, where I see this film sort of differs from Scorsese's usual reflection on the darkness of man. This film feels much more like an apology for it than a psychological exploration of it. Like the main character isn't King. The main character is Ernest. And to me, as I was watching this film, one of the things that I saw or about this, or one of the things I felt about it, is the recognition of this, as opposed to it just being man is evil, there's evil in man. This one was different to me. It was sort of like, we are like this, and we're sorry for it. And even the fact of the narrow and the wide road that they refer to as, when DiCaprio takes the narrow road as the FBI agent, I forget what his name is, but anyway, Jesse Plemons.
Yeah.
Says the idea of being different, doing better, which we hear a lot about. In that sense, I felt that there was actually more of an optimism here about some of Scorsese's other films, because it didn't just sit there and say the world sucks. It was like, the world sucks, but what can we do about it? And we're sorry for what happened, is what it felt like to me. I don't know how you guys felt about that.
An
Did you get
apology
that?
and an acknowledgement, really.
Yeah.
Like, there is that element of, these are the baser natures that we fight against, and we're sorry for them.
Did you get that
It's
impression?
like we're going to try to do, like, we have, it's a call to do better, if that makes any kind of sense.
Yes, that's what I was feeling. Robert,
Yeah, I was curious, did you get that impression because of the radio play at the end?
That was part of it. To me, the shift in tone, because it's almost like two movies. It's almost two movies, because once the FBI comes into it, the film does sort of, I mean, they're still continuing major threads, but to me it felt like there's the fall and then there's the repair. And I feel like we spend a lot more time with Ernest trying to understand what's going on than we do in the first half.
And that's the whole point, because when you really look at the entire narrative of this story, everything would have happened the exact same way, whether Ernest would have been there or not.
Yeah.
And we're there on that ride with Ernest.
It would have just been
what
someone
the
else.
hell just happened?
Yeah.
Like, Ernest strikes me as one of those guys who's doing evil. And I would say, I can't even say not knowingly, because he knows what he's doing, but doesn't really reflect on the moral implications of it. And
thinks he can keep it separate from his day-to-day life.
Yeah, right. As if it's some sort of, it's just, oh, I'm doing that, but this is my life and this is who I am. But you're not really, there was no reflection in him until the end. And I think that's why I thought it came out. It wasn't just the radio play. I think the radio play helps. Like Scorsese coming in with that final hit, a final reminder, if you will, that there was no investigations, or that the stories were not told.
No, but I mean, that's Marty with the rubber mallet of exposition going to the audience, going doink.
It's fair. That's a fair point.
I was a little surprised he did that. I'm not quite sure how I feel about that, because he is always been someone who just sets up these situations, very 1970s filmmaker. This is what it is. This is what things are like, and you can take what you will. So I didn't necessarily, I mean, I felt that, I suppose as a way to tell you what happened later, as opposed, most films they'll have like the at the end, the little essay will come up of this person went to jail and for this long, like at the end of Goodfellas, same, that's what happens. And so I thought he was just sort of doing something like that in a different way, but I'd have to see it again because I was a little surprised he did, because I know what you mean. It did have more of a sense of like, oh, look at what we've done. It was a little preachy in my view, but I'd have to see it again because I sort of, when it was going on, I was like, what the hell? Why is he doing this? Well, I was a little surprised. It put me in my head, but I'd have to see it again. I may have a different perspective because usually he's just, like even as early as Wolf of Wall Street, which I wasn't crazy about, but it was this guy learned nothing and you're left kind of like, holy shit. And you have to kind of go to the film a little bit more. So, but again, I'd have to see that again.
But also, it's a filmmaker in his 80s, sort of reflecting on a life lived and wondering if he's gotten any better. Right. I mean, Marty from Mean Streets is going to be different from Marty from Goodfellas, is going to be different from Marty now.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I call him Marty because obviously we're close personal friends, but that's another story.
I know that you're on your way over to his place right now. I know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Tell him we said hi. He's not returning.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Consider it done.
He's almost like, when Hitchcock released movies, it became you went because of Hitchcock. Like that's what it's become with Scorsese's movies. It's like you go because it's him, which is interesting because there's really no one like that nowadays. Where because of streaming, the industry is so different. And even then, I mean, who went to the movies for a director?
I would argue that there's still a couple, but
I guess Tarantino.
I don't disagree.
Nolan's
I guess
Nolan, Fincher, Paul Thomas Anderson.
There are some,
but those are more film buffs will do. But I'm saying even like the general audience, I feel because even when he came on in the end of the film, the amount of people in the theater who were like, oh my god, that's Scorsese, like so many people gasped that he
it's more of a household name. It's more, exactly. It's more of a household brand than say somebody else. No,
it's kind of Hitchcockian in that sense. And apparently back in the day, even Preminger, which people are not maybe as aware of nowadays, but people went because it was an Otto Preminger film, which I didn't know, which was interesting that he was that much of a personality that the audience even knew him. But yeah, I thought, again, just an interesting observation in regards to, what is bringing people to the theaters to see certain films that we saw this year, like Barbie and Oppenheimer. What is it that's bringing people to go, which I think is a very interesting, I know that's a little off topic, but it's interesting to see how they're finding ways with certain filmmakers.
And it's interesting too, and I know we got to start wrapping up because I know we're out of time, but you hear Scorsese when he comes out with a new film, people are always asking him about Marvel. This is the big thing about superhero films. Right. And so it seems like for the last 10 years, whenever there's a new film, somebody's asking him that, and there's this conversation. But it does feel like right now, in some ways, box office heavy. There's certain directors, like you said, that people are going to see, and there's brands. And in some ways, the director is a brand of his own.
Yeah, exactly.
Scorsese's a brand.
Yes.
But yeah, I hear what you're saying. It is interesting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Gentlemen, we got to wrap this up. We're running out of time. I'm so grateful, so thankful to have you both here. But we got to screen it or skip it. So. Killers of the Flower Moon, screen it or skip it.
Rob?
Screen it for sure. You gotta, anything Scorsese does, you gotta put it on, even if it's bad. But he's the guy. Not that this is bad. Yeah. Well, to me,
terrible,
I mean,
but see it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, to me, it's like he's been making movies for 55 years. If you include his short films, 60 years. So it's sort of like he's given so much to cinema, not just with what he's made, but in terms of the Film Foundation, educating people, that it's like you have to just give it a shot just because of the guy. But yeah, in terms of the film itself, yeah, certainly highly recommend it.
And yeah, it's an unequivocal screen it, because I mean it's one of those things where, like you said, Rob, just the contribution to the body of work and to the importance of cinema is unquestionable. And I mean, this is yet another reminder of why we need the cinematic experience, because again, you see this in the theater, it doesn't feel like it's three, like you see the runtime, you go, oh my god, 3.5 hours, it flies.
Yeah,
Oppenheimer flies. You know, it's when stories are done right and done in this expansive, bigger format, they can be life-changing. And I mean, it's an art form in and of itself that, you know, is one of those things that people, at least I feel, are trying to appreciate again, even with some of the bigger blockbuster stuff with like Mission Impossible and like all that stuff. It's one of those things where the screen, you know, size matters. The screen matters. The environment matters, especially when you're watching something like this. And this definitely qualifies as a must watch, which is why, again, it's in theaters for an exclusive run before it hits Apple TV Plus.
Right.
I love when a streamer will do that, when they give it a significant runtime. It's like, streamers going to make movies, they're going to put them on their streaming, love it. But I do love when these things happen. You know, Netflix or Apple make a film, put it in theaters. It's an unequivocal screen it for me. I like the way you described it, Dave, because it absolutely is. I think this is a fantastic film. I don't feel like I have to say whether he's succeeded just because it's Scorsese, but it's good Scorsese.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
It absolutely is. And it's compelling and it's fascinating and it starts fantastic conversations. And right now, I mean, it's certainly one of the better things that's in theaters right now. Let's put it that way. There's not a lot out there, and I think this is more than worth the time. Yes, it's long. Yes, it is. It's funny. I think David, I think we were talking about this afterwards. I thought it's long, and you could trim it, but I don't think it would have the same effect. Like it's very good at the length that it is.
Yeah.
So I don't want to see an edit where it's down to 130 minutes or something like that. It's a very good film.
Yeah.
And
well, I mean, it's yet another reminder. I mean, the Ridley's Napoleon will be a little under 3 or something like that, but when it hits the streamer, it'll be the 4+ version, 4-hour plus.
Right.
Version. So yeah.
Right.
See, and that's a great way to do it. I love that. It's like, okay, it's a automatic director's cut. I think anyway. I'm dovetailing here. No, absolutely screen it. I loved it. I thought it was an excellent film across the board. It was really strong. Thank you both so much again. I always love chatting with you. It's always a great conversation. Sell your wares.
Me too.
Sell your wares. Robert, let's start with you. Where can people find you?
Sure. So on what is now called X. Thank you, Elon. I am at RB at the movies. And Instagram is the same as my YouTube channel. It is at Robert Bellissimo at the movies. Same with Facebook, same thing. Robert Bellissimo at the movies. You'll find the page, and the YouTube channel is youtube.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies, where we explore all things cinema. I review films. I interview guests who work in film and television. Sometimes there's just short videos where maybe I'm looking at a aspect of a film or a performance or unboxing of Blu-rays. So I just say it's an exploration of cinema in various ways. So you can check me out there.
Love it. Absolutely. And Dave?
Well, and as always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the editor and a publisher over at In the Seats.ca for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, basically the moving image at large. But also, I am the host and producer of In the Seats With, where I sit down with a wide-ranging variety of entertainment industry professionals, and I pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and in a conversational fashion. You can find us on your favorite social media platform at In the Seats, be the Facebook, the Instagram, the Letterboxd, the well, X, but I'm calling it Twix. So from now on, I will
Twix, I
be
love
referring
that.
to the Twix and X as Twix. At In the Seats for all sorts of fun updates, and find us and talk to us and engage in the world of cinema, because that's why we're all here in the first place.
Thanks, guys, so much. I love our conversations. They are just so great. I really appreciate it. And for you at home, a reminder, you can find us wherever podcasts are available on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts. You can subscribe to us there. And you can find us on YouTube at Screenfish. You can subscribe to us there as well. And in both cases, we have great conversations with industry professionals about their current projects and things going on. Plus, more amazing conversations like this through Screenfish Radio. And if you go to the podcast page at screenfish.net, you can download Fishing for More, which are some small group questions to help you get the conversation started where you are. So, gentlemen, thank you once again. And for you at home, we started the conversation. This was Screenfish.